Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 33 of the Austin Downbeat. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I have a great episode for you today. But first, we start with the rundown. This covers November 15th through the 21st. And here we go. Matt Mason is at Stubbs tonight, as well as Barbara Nesbitt at Saxon Pub. Tomorrow night, Wednesday, the 16th, Jimmy Vaughan is at Antone's. Love and Chaos is at Guero's. And Erica Michelle and Katrina Kane are at Geraldine's doing a song swap. Thursday, the 17th, Malat is at the Austin Convention Center, as well as Chief Cleopatra. They are there. Natalie Price is at Party on the PNC Plaza. Jake Lloyd is at Still Austin Whiskey. And Pat Byrne is supporting Joe Pug at 310 ACL. Big night that night. Friday, November 18th, you have Madame Radar and the Archangels at Hotspot. Saturday, you have my guest last week, Brittany Lobas, with her duo called the Petticoat Five at 360 Uno. Shiny Ribs, he's at Green Hall, and DZ Brown is at Mueller Lake Park. On Monday, I don't even need to look at my notes on this one. You have the usual suspects. You have Monday Night Supper Club at El Mercado South. Ben Jones, maybe he's back, hopefully. Pat Byrne, Barbara Nesbitt. You have Dale Watson at the Continental Club, and then you have Bob Schneider doing his thing at the Saxon Pub. All right, let's get down to my guest today. It's a long conversation because frankly, I could have talked to him for hours. I have in the past, just not on camera. So Todd Wolfson is our guest today. And if you don't know him, I pretty much guarantee that you have seen his work. This man is an icon capturing icons. You have seen the photographs he has taken that have become album covers. You've seen music videos he's done. The man at the center of this man is an artist, a creator, and wrapped around all of that is just love and connection and authenticity, and just what you see is what you get. And I like what I see, and I'm so grateful to be able to call him a friend. He is no short of just a wonderful human being. And so we just sort of have a very ad hoc conversation. And I love where it went. And so pour yourself a glass of wine or make a cup of tea and enjoy my conversation with the beautiful, beautiful Todd Wolfson. Welcome to the show, Todd Wolfson.
Hey,
We're on.
hi, Kat. How are you?
Hi, Toddy.
It's already fun.
We don't really know what we're doing tonight, but we know it's going to be fun and it's going to be good. And I feel like it's going to be deep. And my first question, when I was thinking about you, well, first of all, let me just back up and say thank you so much for coming on. It is insane that it's taken this long because, well, I'll tell you in a little bit how I feel about you. But I've known about your name for years and years. As long as I've known Johnny Gowdy, which has been like 5 years, 6 years, I have heard your name, but I have never, and I have heard how beloved you are. And I've gotten like little bits and pieces of this Todd guy, so randomly. And I was just always kind of like, I don't think I deserve to know him yet. I haven't been here that long, and I was, I'm a little bit of an outsider. I'm not from here, whatever, and I don't have the rich history of a lot of the people that I talk to and whatever. Anyway, and then this year, I think I reached out to you maybe because I went on a live, like Facebook Live with Johnny so randomly, and then I hopped off so you could get on, and I was like, oh, we're so close. We're like passing each other in the virtual hall
I
room.
think you and I were both kind of like, oh, who's that? Oh,
super cute.
There they are. Oh, yeah. Because I was like, oh, so Johnny's on another person's podcast because he does his own for like 11 years now, but every so often he goes on somebody's podcast. So I'm so used to him talking to people. It's fun to hear him even though I know so much of his story, it's so fun to hear him talk about himself, because he's the best storyteller. He's just
he's
awesome.
a wonderful human being. I know we both share love for him.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, he's so cool. So I feel like, thank you. You know, Johnny gets shout outs quite often on this show, because he's just, you know, one of those strings in the threads of this fabric. But yeah.
JG, I love you.
Mwah. Thank you, Johnny. So
There
he
you
is
go.
the reason we are here today. But I
Yeah.
was thinking about you today and I was like, who is Todd Wolfson? Like, that is the question.
I want to know. Tell me.
Who are you? Like, dang it. I feel like, well, the good news is I feel like I'm going to know you for a really long time. So I will be answering that question over, you know, for the rest of my life. But, you know, in a nutshell, can you just, how would you summarize yourself?
Oh, Jesus. Um, you know, I like to just, if you're asking me who I am, like today, and I don't mean today, I mean today,
This
in
season.
the bigger sense.
Yeah.
I'm an artist. I really am an artist. I'm not a photographer. I'm not certainly not a musician, although I play all the time.
Mhm.
I'm just a person who likes to create. I think at a young age, I was already, doing scribble drawings and trying to paint. And, I got a friend's guitar. When he got a new one, I bought his guitar from him when I was, I guess, around 12.
Mm.
And, I played maracas and bongos, and I had friends that were in bands. Like I had prodigious music friends in Tulsa where I grew up. And I was like, oh, I want to play with them. So literally my mom would collect green stamps. If all you people know what green stamps are, you got them you'd go to the grocery store, and when you bought $50 worth of groceries or $120 worth of groceries, you'd get X amount of green stamps out of this little machine that was by where you checked out. And you'd put those in a little book and you'd fill up those books. And my mom and so many people back then would fill up those books, and they had a catalog, and you'd look in the catalog, and then you'd go to an actual store, an actual storefront, and pick stuff out.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh. Fun.
my mom would collect so many, and she'd get like, maybe she got a blender or this or that, whatever she would get, but she'd always give us three boys, a smaller amount of the books and let us get something. And I remember the only thing I think I ever bought with green stamps was a percussion set that I said was claves, maracas, and bongos. Like not
Mm.
good ones either, just like cheapies. And I'd sit in with my friends on these gigs, these friends of mine that would play these little rock gigs. And the drummer didn't have I always remember, because the drummer didn't have one of those anchor things, so his drums would slide when he kicked
Oh
the
yeah,
drum.
yeah.
So I literally would sit on a pillow in front of the kick drum with my back to it to hold it in place. And I'd be sitting there like, click, click, doing whatever I would do for each song.
That's
And
fantastic.
that's the start of my live music career, which was very short-lived, by the way. But I've always done just a little bit of everything, and got into photography at a very young age because my grandfather and my dad always had brownies and Instamatics, and then later on my dad got an SLR, a 35mm camera.
Mhm.
And I just kept kind of, oh, this is interesting. And they had everybody in my family, my grandparents, my parents had really good photo albums. And it wasn't, I think a little bit later in my teens, I started to look at albums and, sexy magazines and all that. It was like, ooh, this could be
Mhm.
interesting to do.
Yeah.
But I basically was inspired by the documentation of family. And to this day, the thing that touches me is, let's say I'd known you a long time. I come into your house and you have a picture of your kids that I took on the wall, or,
Mm.
somebody has a picture of their husband on their nightstand or their wife on their nightstand, or just some 4x6s on their fridge that I took. When I go into their house and I see that, that kind of stuff makes me way more
Mm.
emo than, you know, having a cool record cover or something in a magazine or whatever, because
Mm.
that's like the basis of why I even started this, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah, that is so cool. So, I mean, I think that that fits you perfectly. I think you are a creator. And I was also thinking about, you know, how this speaks to Austin. I was reading some things about you um, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But the things that I was reading was like people commenting on you and your work. And I've always on the show called the, the community of musicians here in Austin like the fabric, you know, the fabric of the community.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally.
And then it just came into my mind. You're the needle sewing the thread together.
Well, I think I'm just
You're
one.
kept, but you're
We're one of
captured.
them.
You are, but you're capturing that community. You are. How many decades have you been in this city, capturing members of this community, specifically members of other artists and creators, and musicians, and I mean it's been decades, right?
Yeah, and they're, getting away from the fabric metaphor, which is a really good one, and I use it all the time.
Yeah.
But the other F word, family, you know,
Yes. Yes.
I, speaking of like stuff in somebody's home, back in the day when Alejandro lived in the middle of town back in the 90s, when we were yeah, our relationship was a lot newer and younger. I started to document all his kids and him and everything. And you'd go into his house or certain people's houses that were my musician friends. And besides doing their album covers, I'd go in their house and there'd be like 9 to 12, you know, 11 by 14s and 8 by 10s and this and on the, like I said, and on the fridge. And when I go in there, like that's, compared to now, 2022, that seems like forever ago, but already I felt so honored and humbled and loved by that it was my images that were on their walls, you know what I mean, that were
Yeah.
documenting them. And the privilege of being able to do that too is
Yeah.
pretty awesome, to be
Yeah.
that, to not just see my friend up on stage playing guitar or singing, but to be a part of their lives, to go pick up the kids with them at school and to have birthday parties and all that cool stuff. That's more my milieu, I think, than, if that's the right word, than portraiture in a way. I love the jazz of like being at an event when I go to the music awards or this or that. They never have me out front. People always want me out in the back. So
Mhm.
I'll get the family photos. You know what I mean? I'll
Right.
get
That
the
slice of
little bits
life.
and pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that to me, like I said, I call it the jazz of life, because if I'm doing a portrait, I'm a little bit more of a director.
Yeah.
We're going for something. We know we're going for this parenthetical portrait or this vibe or whatever the hell we're doing. But when I go to an event and shoot or just hang out at a party or whatever, then it's just like, oh man, look at that. Look, oh, that's happening. Oh, good.
Yeah. Well, you get
And
to
it's
see what's
more
happening. You get to capture what's happening. And
and
there's
it's more well, for my eye and my brain, it's more improvisational. It's like, oh, gotta jump in there, gotta jump in there. So, you know,
where are you more comfortable? Because I had my own photography business for a long time, and I was always way more comfortable in the spontaneous piece. I wasn't super comfortable, or it just wasn't really what I wanted to do with the portraiture and the posing and the like. I didn't want to think about it too hard.
well,
So
see,
where are
that's
you
the
more
whole thing.
comfortable?
Let's say it's 80 something, and you hire me to do photos. I would like get out all my photo books and magazines, and I'd go, maybe I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should do that. And I'd get a lot of, not necessarily anxiety, but I'd get a lot of like, uh, I don't know even what the word is, but I'd be so concerned about what the hell am I going to do with
Well,
them?
expectation, right?
Yeah.
You'd set
And
expectation.
then after doing it a while, and also I was for a time working with hair salons and a lot of local magazines that I'm not going to name names, but the majority of local magazines do not respect photographers. They
Mm,
just, you're just a part of the sausage process to them.
mm,
And a lot of times when you're working for, doing like fashiony stuff, which I used to do a lot more of. Now I just shoot my women friends and create beauty with them. It's like a jam. It's more normal. That's where
mhm.
I'm comfortable. But I did so much stuff that was either shoved down my throat or that I got so anxious about what am I going to do. I started to do it long enough where I got comfortable with
Mm,
the process. And I threw that all out because I'd also watched documentaries on like Richard Avedon or
mhm.
some musician or somebody. And a repeated thing through all these different great artists I love talking was always they learn to get out of their own way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Like, so I got out of my own way. And, a lot of times, most of the time, I mean, I'm about to do a video with Beaver Nelson and his
Mhm.
little dog Josie. And so we're conceptualizing it. But even when I make music videos, I
Mhm.
don't like, if a song has a story or a vibe to it, I don't want to recreate that visually. I
Yeah.
want to play off of that and make something beautiful you can watch and listen to what they're singing about and not illustrate it. So
Right.
I don't, a lot of people come at me with concepts and I'm like, I'm not comfortable doing that. If you want my best stuff, let's just go do stuff. Show up with
Mhm.
clothes. We'll look at what the light is today and we'll go do, you went out with me and we just
Mhm.
goofed on a
Yeah.
back street,
Yeah.
and it was perfect for
Yeah.
both
We
of
need to
us,
do that again. Yeah.
and that's the thing also, when you don't put yourself in a box, this is something else I learned, magic happens. Like you'll go somewhere and you'll go, oh my God, that wall is the perfect color, or somebody or something happens by or happens that you're like, that's perfect. I mean, I've had
Yeah.
that happen dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable doing portraiture because I make it fun,
Yeah, you
whether
do.
I'm getting paid or whether I'm not getting paid, I kind of approach it all the same now.
Mm-hmm.
And the only difference is I better have some damn good stuff if I'm getting paid. But that's
So,
not really something I'm worried about either.
okay. So question about that too, because I was just telling someone the other day when I first started my photography business and doing it,
Yeah.
for dollars, I had
Hmm.
a really, really hard time asking the money part. And so I used to tell the client, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're just going to pretend that we're just going to go do this for fun. We're not talking about money. Don't bring your checkbook. Don't bring your credit card. We are just literally going to go have some fun. We're going to see what happens. And then we'll talk about paying me or whatever. Cause like it got so in the way for me because I
It
never,
still does. It always
yeah,
will. I
yeah.
mean, unless you're just totally a hard ass business person, which I don't think neither you or I is. I mean, it's really funny. Just yesterday, I was talking to somebody and we were talking conceptually and all that. And then they were like, well, we got to talk about this. And they're like, what do you think your budget would be for doing this? And another thing is kind of like, I have a few things. I don't know if I read them somewhere or they're just in me by now, but a couple negotiating tactics. Like if you're negotiating with somebody and you don't know quite what to say or how you feel, you can get off the phone or off the computer or whatever and go, oh my God, I've got an appointment, I've got to go do this. Oh, my soup's boiling over on the stove, whatever, and give yourself time to like
Time to
let
think.
it like marinate a little bit. But when the money thing happens, another thing I learned is a lot of times, because I'm an old Austin softy hippie-ish kind of guy, and I've been working with a bunch of other poor artists so long, I always undersell my price. Like
Mhm.
I'll quote somebody 500 or 800, and they want to offer me 1,200, or, I'll quote somebody 1,000 and they're willing to pay me 2,000. So I kind of always like hold back and go, well, they'll go, how much do you charge for this? Or what do you think? And I'll go, well, what are you thinking? And they'll throw
Yeah.
out a number. And a lot of times it'll be more than I was just about to spit out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that'll work. That'll be okay. But inside I'm going, thank God they said that, So it's like, like I said, I'm not Todd the negotiator at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
But I have a few of my tricks that I'm like, that I use on a day-to-day basis, because it helps me to get to get paid.
Yeah. I think you should just double whatever number you have in your brain to start with. Just double it. Whether
That's
you
not
have
a
to
bad
say the
idea
number
either.
first or not, just double your number. And
That's a
then,
good idea.
yeah. And then,
It's always good to start high, because then you can whittle down, and then they think they're getting a deal.
yeah. Yeah. Now we're exposed. This is expose.
It's okay. It's okay. Like, I think a lot of people could benefit from it. It's not
Yeah.
like I'm just figuring out, or it's a big secret.
It's no secret. Yeah. Yeah. But it is good for people. And it's good for people to hear, like every episode that I have, there's always nuggets of gold, and people like you that have been, so successful in doing their thing for so long. And when they kind of hear the real life struggles or the real life bits of it, I think that's very valuable for people to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So photography, that's your jam. It's also music videos. You do a little bit of that. What else are you working on?
Well, I've got my, for years and years and years, I think when I was all of like 15 or 16 in Tulsa, and this guy just died last week. There was a guy who worked at a local, I think the CBS affiliate TV station, and he taught RTF at my high school. And he was he was a badass photographer. His name was Gaylord Heron, and he put out a book called Vagabond, which I have. You can't find it anymore. It's like a collector's item at this point. But his book was full of his paintings, some biblical, are they proverbs or whatever? There was parts of the Bible in there, and there was some of his own writing, and there was paintings he did, but mostly photography. And he had pictures of every kind of stuff, from abstract stuff to landscapes, but more like urban landscapes, funky, weird stuff from downtown Tulsa. One of my favorite pictures is he did this double exposure. Like, the biggest actor and the only real known actor was this guy doing a late night TV show called Mazeppa Pompazoides Uncanny Film Festival and Camp Meeting. His name was Gaylord Sartain. He went on to be in billions of movies. He was in The Outsiders. He was in Mississippi Burning. Him and Bronson Pinchot did a Laurel and Hardy movie that was horrible. But he was in one of the Steve Martin movies. He's a great actor, but he had his own TV show, and he's the guy that gave Gary Busey his first start. Oh. But him and Leon Russell, who was like, in Austin, there's a million musicians. In Tulsa at that time, basically, we had Leon Russell.
Right.
And Gaylord Heron had done this picture of the two of them. It's kind of blending them, but half of it is Gaylord and half of it is Leon. And it's so psychedelic. And then he has this picture of Sly Stone coming into a venue that he took with flash, and Sly's all cool with his afro and his shirt up and down here. And just, he just had so many pictures. And back then, my whole point is, back then at 15 or 16, I already knew I wanted to do a photo book. Well, as I got older, I said, when I'm 50, I'm going to do this book. And then when I was 50, I obviously hadn't done it. And I just, in the past few years, finished. I was going to do a big book. And then my friend David said, that's problematic for you, because I kept stop and starting. And he gave me some ideas, like do a bunch of smaller books, like maybe around 100 pages each, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Do one that's this about this, do one. And he said, I was trying to write a lot for my book because that's kind of the thing with Gaylord Heron and all that. Like he wrote, a lot of the books I saw have little, they'll have photos, but then they'll have a little section of writing. And I was trying to do that. And I'm not a writer. I'm really not. Of all the arts, that's the one, when I write, it looks like a telegram. And so, he said, don't write, do photos. You're a photographer.
Yeah.
And so I finally put a book together. That's my first book. And I already have a second one I'm throwing in a folder on my computer. But then when I got it finished, my friend Lance and I laid it out and designed it and worked over it for a couple of years. And now that I've got it done, I was trying to get it published and hitting a lot of, we're behind because of the pandemic, or we're not interested in that kind of book. And I haven't worked hard on trying to get it published. I haven't worked that hard on trying to figure out how to self-publish it. But in all that time, I've been kind of grasping onto a few ideas of what I think I want to do. And so I wanted it to be out now so it could be sold over the holidays. But, if I get it out even in the next year, I have to. I mean, bottom line is I have to get it out. I have to figure out if I can find a publisher or how I'm going to self-publish and just how I want to do it. Because I kind of want to do it my own way. I don't want to make it I don't want to I don't like making things hard for myself.
Yeah.
Basically. And it's not because I'm lazy. It's more because until I figure something out, I just don't do it, a lot of times.
Do you feel like something has to be sort of perfect before you do it, or you kind of a wing it?
No, it's not the perfect thing. It's just the figuring it out. And right now, I thought by now I would have figured it out. And, that's not, again, like I'm a photographer and I like to play music and I like to hang with my friends and make art and all that. But the whole other side of it, it's like Lewis Black, one of the guys that started the Chronicle. He said a long time ago to me, or about me, he says he understands why I'm not a commercial photographer, because that doesn't seem like it's that much fun. Well, that applies to this too. Making the book was a little frustrating, but it was fun too, especially once Lance and I got on board and started doing it. Then it became fun. Kind of pulling it together is the hardest part, because you pull stuff together and then you're like, I don't like that. Then you start again. You're like, I don't like that. I'm sure it's the same way for a lot of people putting together a record,
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I hear people go, I wrote 300 songs and there's 12 on here. You know what I mean? Or there's 10 on here. So there's a lot of like, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. This doesn't feel right. It's cool for that maybe, but it's not cool for this. So, I've hit my walls that I've hit are probably a lot more personal and self, just like I said, being on this learning side of it and figuring out what and how I want to do it. Because I'm just I'm not your average bear. I'm just never have been,
I think you're perfect. So perfect. I may be biased, but
yeah, so the book, that's probably the biggest thing ahead of me that I just need, because I feel like once I get that first one out, then it's like the wheels of the train are going down the track, and then it'll be easier to get the second one, which I'm already editing. The first one's more of a portfolio. I sent it to you.
You did.
It's more of a portfolio of a lot of what I've done. But the next one will be way more Austin centric. It'll be more personal. It'll be more the family side of stuff. Whereas the first one's more portraity and more, just documents from the music and art life that I lead, Whereas the next one will still be that, but it'll be a lot more, I'll feel like I have more elbow room making that one to throw a lot more personal work.
I'm almost wondering if it makes more sense to do the second one first then.
No, not for me, because
No.
the reason I did the first one the way I did is so that, like, there's pictures I think of Kinky in there, and Will Ferrell, and
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Vaughan, and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and stuff like that. Stuff that's going to translate to some guy in Chicago is going to be like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I
Lamar.
love UT. I went to UT and I love Jimmy Vaughan. So they're going to love a certain picture. And they're like, oh, there's Kinky, man. I bought
Willie
his
Nelson and
record.
his
And
sister.
Willie and Bobby. Yeah. I mean, so many things like that. So I kind of wanted to make that one a little bit more universal-ish.
A wider.
But I agree with you that I think the Austin one to people outside of Austin will be interesting too, because we're one of those places that maybe not right now, but we're still kind of known as one of those places that's an embarrassment of riches, and people are like into the whole Austin
Mm-hmm.
scene from other places. It's
Yeah.
why the
Yeah,
hell everybody moves there.
I can see that. I can see that the reason why you're doing that. I can also see the city of Austin, if it were more Austin specific, finding a way for the city or some sort of, municipal entity to get behind helping you make it.
But see, that's the Todd that would say, I don't want those
No.
because it's kind of one of those things. Okay, this relates to me going out and shooting. My whole life of Austin, if I see you in this outfit, I might go, ooh, I want to shoot her at that old place on 12th and Chicon, if there is still an old place at 12th and Chicon, But or I need to go to up Lamar to that old gas station,
Yeah.
or go downtown to this big cement wall. Like, I approach everything that way. And I don't like people telling me what to do or putting things in and if you do a book and you get people behind, and it's what I was going to say about doing those locations. I don't generally go to places where people are going to like kick me out. I
Mm-hmm.
pick all these funky locations. I'm not going to some, nice person's home and shooting on their lawn, or, at some private thing, and sometimes I do go somewhere and a security guard's like, sir, you can't shoot here.
And then you say, don't you know who I am?
No, I'm like,
I know.
okay, I'm out of here. Goodbye. But it's that same thing. If you don't have people telling you, helping you or backing you or whatever, once they start to get behind you, they want a little
Control.
bit of the control, which to me is like, no. Now, if somebody comes behind me and says, we love what you're doing, it's perfect the way it is, go with it, that'd be great, but it's mostly not the case.
Yeah, I agree.
Everybody's got an agenda,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm kind of hippie-ish and stupid in that way, maybe, not
No,
being open to that,
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you have a good plan the way that it is right now, and actually think that that's the smarter way to do it. Casting that wider net, that more kind of national net, and then closing it with a real tight Austin.
Yeah, but then after the Austin thing, I maybe want to do something that's more like abstract sensual stuff, not just
Well, I was
women,
gonna
but
say, yeah,
you know, just some of my stuff that's just cool to look at. You know what I mean? Just a book that's just all about visual and
beauty,
not so much.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
so good at shooting women's bodies and in such a respectful, glorifying way, and also just the everydayness of a woman's body
Yeah.
that's just wrapped in natural beauty. You have a real way with that. Your eye is just so special. Your artistic eye is
I I
it's super
I
special.
I think a lot of that comes from, I grew up as a single digit person in the 60s. But then in the 70s, I'm becoming a man. I'm having my bar mitzvah, all those things. But no, there was, you have, when it comes to women, especially, you have, the Playboy penthouse, hustler world. You
Mhm.
have the Vogue, you know,
High
uh,
fashion.
high fashion world. And then in Harper's Bazaar, all that. And then lucky in the 70s, because the 60s were kind of the free love, hippie, blah, blah, blah. But by the 70s, sexuality and art was becoming a lot more pop. And
Mm.
so there was a magazine that I still have like a stack of them this big called Photo. It was out of Europe.
Is it FOTO?
No, it's
It's just PH.
PHOTO. And it was a magazine that didn't just have women photography in it. It had wildlife photography and, some stuff that was almost National Geographic-esque. And it had like Ansel Adams and Edward Weston type stuff. But it always had a section or two of this 70s bright colors, vinyl pants on a woman that were red, and then this yellow top and this color and that color and all this kind of stuff that was super hyper art stuff of women. And I didn't right then go, well, this is what I want to do. I didn't, I looked at we used to buy records that were 12 inches by 12 inches, and thank God that's back.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd look at that stuff, you'd look at these record covers, you'd look at these photos in the magazines, and as a visual artist, no matter where you thought you were going, if I was going to be a photographer or not, they just, there's album covers. I mean, think about how iconic like Aladdin Sane cover is, that's like super iconic. Think of like that deep purple cover Machine Head with that kind of weird lettering and that blurry reflecty photo of them. And just, I mean, I could go on and on and on about that. And then, like I said, having those 70s art magazines, like that set my, whether I knew it or not, that was setting my brain up. It was like, programming my brain for, what I would start doing. I didn't, I never had a dream necessarily of being good at what I did. I just wanted to do it, and believe me, I'm not saying this, and again, no names or whatever, but when I started doing it here, that's when I became a real photographer, was here. Once I moved here in late 79. So basically I've been here since 80. And it took me till about the end of that decade, like around 87, 88, 89, to even know anybody. I mean, I didn't know anybody. Like, I wasn't seeing a lot of the cool punk bands or the new wave bands like Glass Eye and all these bands and these, people that were playing Raoul's. And I live like less than a mile from Raoul's in two different places, but I didn't know anybody, so I didn't know the scene. So the only shows I was seeing was Zappa and Joan Armatrading, a lot of good shows, at the Paramount or at the Armadillo or this or that. But I didn't get to be part of this community till around the late 80s. And
Talk a
then,
little bit about what that looked like when you first had the thought of like, oh, okay, now I'm really getting my foot in the door, and I'm not only getting my foot in the door, but I'm feeling like I'm a part of this community.
well, I
When did
was
that happen?
already doing a couple things, nothing big. Yeah, I'd go from the day the Chronicle started, I'd go bug Nick and Lewis and Margaret Moser. Lewis would yell at me and go, "We don't need your pictures." And Nick would just stand there quietly, like he still does to this day. He's like Mr. like try to read me guy. But Margaret, from the get-go, from like 82, 83, when they started, I'd go to their offices and I'd go, "I really want to take pictures for your magazine, for your newspaper." And it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. And by 86, I got to take a picture of the 23rd Street Vendors Market on Guadalupe, and then some political dude, and then this and this. So I started to get work, and then, I didn't get my first cover for them till 92. Almost 10 years after they started. But then once I started, it's things like getting that cover. And also in 1988, the late 80s, I worked at kitchen, like I worked at a dorm kitchen, and I worked at the original Bazaar on the Drag, and I cooked at the Mothers on Duval. I was the first cook with Charles Mays and Cameron when they opened that place for like 3 weeks, because they couldn't find anybody. And so I helped him for 3 weeks. I did all this stuff. I worked in camera stores. I worked at like Edison's or Service Merchandise, one of those kind of stores. But I was working at a place called About Faces that was a glamour studio that a guy probably 10 years older than me owned. And back then, do you remember what glamour studios were like?
I remember glamour shots. Yes, that was
Yeah,
in the mall.
it's that whole thing. This was called About Faces. I called it baked potato photography because they basically take the baked potato and they're like, instead of chives and sour cream and bacon bits, it's like a
A
boa
boa,
and,
a
and
tiara.
teased out hair and, putting a glittery frock on your top and all this. And the guy that did it was a really good technical photographer. Bill, the owner, was a great technical photographer, but he was not an artist. He was a businessman and
Right.
he was a commercial photographer.
Yeah.
And I didn't do the photography. I did all the work in the back. I did the mounting and we didn't develop there. I sent it off to a lab, but I was the guy that put the rolls in the envelope and this and that. And then when the stuff came back, I mounted it and framed it and did all that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that time, like when I was working for him and I was working there part-time and working at Precision part-time, it was in 1988, 88, yeah, 88 or 89, I think it was 88. And there was this big thing called the Rhythm and Blues Foundation concert week. It was a benefit weekend, 2 nights at the Austin Opera House, a Friday and a Saturday. And the makeup artist at About Faces told me about this thing. And she says, we could use a staff photographer. And I suggested your name. And we're going to have a meeting down at Pecan Street Cafe tomorrow afternoon. Come to the meeting. And so like Fran Christina of the Fabulous Thunderbirds and Chris Layton, the drummer for Stevie Ray Vaughan, and this woman, Nancy Eby, that was a lawyer in charge of this. And the whole thing about Rhythm and Blues Foundation, really quick, was they were an organization that was raising money for all these old rhythm and blues musicians that were now, 80, 90, 70, whatever the hell, and were in poor health or didn't have health insurance and all that. They were getting money to help these guys that were the pioneers of, the music scene.
It's awesome.
So, and this concert had Bonnie Raitt and Sam from Sam and Dave, and the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and Nick Lowe, and on and on and on. So I go to this meeting, and I just bring whatever photos I'd taken up to that point, and they start handing them around this table of not just those people. There was probably 10 or 12 people on this board of the Austin chapter of this Blues Foundation. And they pass my stuff around. They're going, you're the staff photographer for this. And so the thing comes up. It's October. It's a couple days after my birthday. My birthday's the 13th. I think this is the 15th and the 16th, or 14th and 15th. And I go there, and it's like, it was one of those life-changing things. I was around all these people. I'd never been a part of anything in Austin, maybe a musician here and there. Mm-hmm. Maybe I had a couple muses so far, but not really, nobody knew who the hell I was. I hadn't been doing anything notable in the Chronicle or any other magazine or anything. Mm-hmm. And they allowed me to do this. And the cool thing is there was like, Time Magazine and Rolling Stone and all these journalists that were there, and their photographers and whatnot. They had like green room access. I could go anywhere I fucking wanted to go, Kat, in that for 2 nights. And then there was also an auction at a cool home that an artist friend of mine had, that I got to hang out with Nick and Stevie and Jimmy and Bonnie and all these people too. And like I said, I'd never, now it's more like, well, I've done that now, I know what it's like to hang with Bobby Nelson and, Terry Bozzio and whatnot. But it was all like that family part of it. That's when that, like, you're part of the family, boom, and it was forever changed me, because something like that gives you confidence. You know what I mean? Not only do you feel loved and respected or whatever right off the bat,
Mhm.
but it gives you confidence on the next thing and the next thing, because those people, somebody of importance to me, like a group of people, validated me. So I
Yeah.
was like, fuck, man. I was like,
I
this is
deserve to
all,
be here.
yeah, and this is all right. I'm gonna do, it's not like you got a taste of the crack. You're like, ooh, I'm gonna
Yeah.
do this more.
And
This
like
is
we're
feels
gonna
good.
keep it at this level or lateral or above.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And like
exactly.
this is the new baseline.
And that's kind of, like I said, I kind of in my heart knew what I wanted to do. And that's another thing about Austin back then, because now what I was going to say a little earlier is everybody and anybody has a camera and is a photographer now. It's just the way it is.
Hmm.
But back then it was me and Mark Guerra and Scott Van Osdol and a couple other people. You know what I mean? There was like 3, 4, 5 of us that people would even think about calling. You know what I mean? We were just the short list. That's all there was. And so that helped too, because if
Yeah.
they weren't going to Mark, they were coming to me. If they weren't coming to me, they were going to Scott. Da 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 da. And back then too, and I don't feel like just in social media and the world, I think everybody has lost a lot of respect for everybody else. But like if, let's say, Marsha Ball or Luann Barton was Mark's client, I didn't go after them.
Right.
You kind of had respect. Whereas now, I don't think anybody cares about stuff like that. It's just there's a million people and a million musicians, and everybody's taste, and I believe everybody should have a little taste of everything. It'd be boring if you just work with the same people all the time. But also, like I said, if a photographer was working for a store, if or an artist or whatever, you kind of go, well, there's other things. I'm not gonna go after their thing. They got that.
Mm.
That, and it's, and also there was also much later in life, like I went through a point where I was really getting a lot of work, and I was doing cool artsy stuff like for stores like Flipnotics and Garba Go Go, and these cool stores that were here that were more funky artsy boutique type stores. But
Mhm.
also because there wasn't a lot of people doing that kind of LA, New York, Paris kind of vibe, I was trying to do that, and I was working for some high end like men's suit stores and women's clothing stores and all that, which wasn't really what I wanted to do. And then one day I see, I think it was a By George ad that this guy, Andrew Shapter, shot. And it was like, a lot of times I look at people's work that was, running along, going on alongside mine. And I'd be like, that's crap. They're not as good as me, whatever. When I saw Andrew's stuff, I was just like, dude, this guy, I knew he was here. I didn't know him, but I knew he was an Austin guy now. And he was shooting, and he had that vibe. He had the international vibe, which I
Mhm.
was aspiring to because people needed it from me. But I wanted to do the weird artsy stuff for the funky boutiques and all that, because
Yeah.
that's me. And so when I saw him, that also was a time of a big change in my life, to where I was like, oh, there's this badass here. That's his side of the road.
Mhm.
Now I can stay on my side of the road and not
Oh,
have
good.
to cross over. And it's really funny. This is just so, there's so many little fractals to what this is all about when you become a photographer. Once I saw his work, and we were both working, he had kind of helped start Trebeza with the owners that started it. It was, owned by different, it's been owned by a few different people and had a bunch of publishers now. But the guy that started it and him worked together a lot. And then I got my foot in the door there doing not what he was doing, but some of the other stuff. And we got to be friends because I think we met at like a little fashion event or something. And I didn't know him. I go up and realize who it is. We start talking, and within like 5 to 7 minutes, we're already like, hey, we were in love with each other from the get-go. And till he died a few years ago, and
Mhm.
until the day he died, like of somebody doing exactly what I do, basically,
Mhm.
because he started out as a photographer, and became a filmmaker and made some really cool films, some very renowned, cool films. And through all that, he and I, there never was anything but love. I never had that kind of love for somebody in my, as even if my friends that I kind of trained or taught that were younger than me and whatnot that I loved, I'd look at what they did and under my breath or in the back of my head, I'd be going, well, they're never going to be as good as me. But he and I were just like, we did that thing. We completed each other. Like I helped him on his projects. He helped me on mine, but not in a physical way, in a supportive way. Like we could always bounce stuff off each other all the time. And that was another thing, like having somebody the last decade of, the probably more than a decade, but a big chunk of a decade that was like somebody that he was another person that even though we weren't creating much art together, I helped him with a couple of his films. He validated the hell out of me because I looked up to him from the minute I saw one of his photos, and the fact that I got to be his friend and we got to give that energy back to each other. That came from him, but I've also, in the bigger picture, I've gotten it from so many people. Like you said, we're a family and we're a fabric. So it's not just me. I mean, I'm a portrait photographer, so I'm nothing without you. I'm nothing without them and them and them and them. It's not a vacuum, Again, that would be horrible.
I know.
But yeah, it's like I've been lucky I've gotten, I've gotten better at what I do, and I've gotten a lot of good validation instead of, just, to this day, it's so much harder now to make work happen because, it's post-pandemic, it's, a million people doing what I do. I used to walk down the street and it'd be like, I'm one of the top 3 guys in the city that people are hiring. Now I feel like I'm on the side of the street under a gutter grating, yelling, going, hey, I'm still here. I'm still here. But because I have a history, thank God, my history and my career brings me a lot of work still. Not a ton as it used to, but still a lot of work. And I'm super grateful for that,
Yeah. That's another reason why you need to figure out the books. I think,
Yeah, I think
that would
it all
really
helps. It all
that will
helps
help.
each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see a new generation of family rising up in this town? Is that something that you're able to see or feel?
I being again kind of leaning into the post-pandemic thing. And even before that, I was one of those guys. I was out 5 or 6 nights a week. And the hard part of not going out is I'm not seeing new music that much. And whereas you also used to just go on the internet or on the radio, whatever, there wasn't that much out there. And yes, it's easier for people to get their music heard than it ever has been because they can do it a million different ways. But also, there's bazillion more things to comb through to find it.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends turn me on to stuff. And I'm old school. I like this. I like this. I know what I like.
Yeah.
So if the first few bars of it or whatever don't grab me, I'm like, well, that's crap. That's crap. That's crap. That's crap. And then, the 7th or 8th thing, I'm like, ooh, what's this? And I'm still going back in history. I'm still discovering, Billy Strayhorn record that somebody turned me on to like 6 months ago. He was a guy that wrote for Ellington. But I didn't know he made his own records, and somebody turned me on to a record like that, or some weird. Darren Murphy just turned me on to the Shags, which were these 3 sisters that were forced to make music basically by their dad, and they were these horrible arrhythmic people But of course, because they were so horrible, much in that Ed Wood kind of way,
Yeah.
that now they're like a cult.
Old classic. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the day, people are like, what the hell is this? I can't listen to this. And so
I've heard the
I'm
thing.
always finding old and new stuff. But other than literally like probably in the last decade, the two artists that have blown me away the most, one is Wet Leg because I just love their energy.
Yes.
But another person a lot of people don't know about, and I try to push her on everybody on Facebook and whatnot, is Tierra Whack. Do you know who Tierra Whack is?
Mm-mm.
I
I never.
Again, this is the beauty of I shot like probably 30 different South bys,
Okay.
and I shot for the Chronicle. I never shot for myself or South by. I always shot for the Chronicle. So right before the music week starts, we'd always have with the music editor what I call the war meeting, where me and 5 or 6 of the photographers that are going to be shooting, we all came together and we had a sheet of 3 to 5 to 6 pages of this is going on Monday, this is going on Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Saturday, blah, blah, blah. So we'd have this and we'd all sit around and we kind of look at the list before the editor started talking if there's anything on it we wanted. The minute we got to that part of the list, I want to do that one, and we never fought over it. We all loved each other. We got what we wanted to do. So one year, probably maybe the second to last year, I shot South by. I go to a venue and I'm blanking on which venue it was, but it was a women's rap hip hop like showcase. And I got there, I missed the first few acts because I was off shooting something else. But I got there early enough to see 2 acts before Tierra Whack, and I can't remember even who they were, but they were the booty shaking, dressed like hoes kind of rap chicks. And then this woman comes out in ripped jeans and a Sam I Am Dr. Seuss t-shirt and kitty cat glasses. No, nothing glamorous about her at all. And number one, even though all the people for all the ho music were all like, hey, ho, I love you, ho, whatever, with the hoes. When she came out, you could hear a noticeable like
Breath.
kind of like
Yeah.
in the audience that knew her and knew of her, and I knew nothing about her, and she was the person I was shooting for the thing. You could hear even before she started this kind of the breathing of people change. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when somebody enters the room and everybody's like, whoa.
Yeah.
And so she gets out there and she is like, I've learned later on, like when I went home, I found out that what an incredible artist she is. That when it comes to freestyling, what freestyling is. It's like just being able to,
of course, yeah,
like rhyme.
it's insane.
Crazily rhyme off the top of your head.
Yeah, it's insane.
She's like a freestylist like nobody I've ever heard. Like people, when she goes on radio, does radio tours, like the DJ dudes are like, come on, let's hear you like start. And she'll just go on there and do something. And you're like, wow. But also everything she does and puts out, like she didn't even release a first record. She put out a 15-minute video that was 15 1-minute songs, and each of them was art directed with a team of her friends and artists and all that. And she's one of those people. I mean, everybody that's watching this, look up Tierra Whack because she'll blow your mind.
So Kiera, Tierra,
Tierra, But I'm telling you, seeing her there was amazing. And you know how like punk rockers do a stage dive out into the crowd? She just had a DJ behind her that was back on the stage, and she was in the front of the stage. At one point in the show, she goes back to where the DJ is, and she runs to the edge of the stage, and she doesn't dive into the stage like any kind of stage dive I've ever seen. She's like an NBA player. From when she gets to the edge of the stage, she jumps up as high as she can in the air over the audience, Like, that's got to be scary to go high, because then if you fall and nobody catches you, you're screwed. Of course, the crowd was huge. But what was
Wow.
really cool is when she did that, I snapped off a bunch of pictures. I got one where she's at the highest arc. Oh, here, I'm on camera. I got one where she's at the highest arc,
Way up here.
and I wasn't using flash. I use natural light from the stage or whatever. I use natural light most of the time. I hate
Yeah,
flash.
me too.
But there was a lot of dudes under her and people that were shooting her with their phones with flash and with their
Mhm.
cameras with flash. So she's frozen in the air, and I'm getting like this blur with my natural light, but then these pops of flash freezing part of her. So I've
Wow.
got this badass art shot. It's one of my favorite live shots in the world. But also, she kind of, you can see as she's up there, there's already people, their hands are up to catch her and
Oh,
hold,
wow.
like, so it's got all this energy. And like, I
Wow.
came home and I did a deep dive. I found that 15-minute video, and ever since I've watched everything I can find on her on YouTube. And especially, I guess, late last year, earlier this year, because of the pandemic and losing her grandma, she wrote this song called Heaven. And
Mhm.
the thing she keeps repeating over is, Heaven's got all my favorite people. Heaven's got all my
Mhm.
favorite. And it's so beautiful. It gives you chills.
Mhm.
I mean, it'll
Mhm.
give you chills when you, and she's in the video, she's walking around with an umbrella, and the rain is coming down on her from the umbrella, and it's not raining. I mean, it's just, she's conceptually one of the, just overall one of the coolest artists I've ever found. So she's probably, like, to me, of newer artists, one of the greatest things that's come along in decades. Like,
So
she's big time.
I'm so gonna check her out. Does she live in Austin or she just
No,
live
no,
in
no. I think
Austin?
she's probably, I don't know if she's from New York, but she's super urban. She's like Chicago or,
Yeah,
something like that.
I can't wait to check her
Philly,
out.
I don't know, but she's like there's nobody that has blown me away like that in ages.
Mm.
Like I said, because I'm still digging, oh, there's the Alice Cooper band got back together and made some recordings. I'm that guy,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So,
Oh goodness. Toddy, it's
what?
already been an hour.
No,
I know.
let's go for the longest Austin Downbeat ever. Let's go to midnight. Come on, Cat. No, whatever. I know I go on and on and on, so we probably
Oh, no, no, no.
talk about lunch.
I I could talk to you forever. I mean, even the first time we met, I just sat in your kitchen and we just chatted and chatted and chatted, and I didn't even know you. And I'm just like, I feel so comfortable sitting in this man that I've never met's home, letting him photograph me and hanging
Well,
out.
isn't that the
Just
way it should be? I mean, that's something I'll tell you,
yeah.
if we're about to wrap this up, like, the thing that I've learned, and this has nothing to do with photography or music or anything, it has to do with humanity,
Mhm.
is as we get older, we've been screwed around by people, we've been admired by people, we've been disappointed by people, we've been supported by people. I mean, we get, if we're lucky, we've had a little bit of it all. And for me, it's like, I feel so blessed to be a person that can connect with people and can, one of my friends told me once, and he's not a very verbose person, and he said to me, he goes, do you realize when you leave somebody after doing what you do, that you leave them happy and in a good place? And I don't think like that, but I'm glad other people do, because when they tell me that, it makes me know that I'm doing the right thing. I'm not doing this, you've seen how I live. I live at the poverty level, of an artist, but my riches are people like you and Johnny, and I've been friends with Jody and Alejandro and most of my friends Lance and Sarah. These are all people I've been friends with 20, 30 years, not just 10 years.
Mhm.
And then there's people like Savannah Welch, who,
Mhm.
like, when I met her, I was already in my 30s, I believe. And she was on the edge of the end of her teens. And she's a person that's way younger than me, of all my close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And from the day I met her, she is the most spiritually, like, just being of light. She teaches me so much just by, not by teaching me, but just by being
Living.
alive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of those people. She's just one that, I'm thinking about her today because it was 6 years ago today where she'd been in the hospital after a freak accident where she lost her leg.
Mm-hmm.
And she even wrote about it today too. Like when she was in the hospital and she was in ICU and she had people around her and she couldn't speak and she was, God knows, still in shock and drugs running through her and all this stuff. I remember showing up to the hospital and like I said, there was already like a dozen people around her. And I just saw her eye in bed and she saw me. And weirdly, I knew she was telepathically telling me, dude, I'm going to be okay. And every day that she was in the hospital, it was like she was throwing a dinner party, literally. Like she'd be like, oh, there's some, soda water over there. And da, da, da. She was so peaceful inside her heart. And I know when you go through, because I had a bike wreck and had a messed up arm, had 3 surgeries and stuff. So I know what it's like to hurt, but I also know what it's like again, the light of people. Like I don't see a point in walking around being sad or, oh, I'm hurt or feeling victimy. It's like even people, that have had a lot of bad stuff happen in their youth, it's like you got to move on in life and find, I'm not a person that travels the world. I'm a guy that my world is Austin, basically. I don't go to New York. I don't go to LA. I don't go to Colorado. I don't go to New Orleans. I used to do all that stuff. But it's like I'm so enriched just being here, and all the people that are crapping on Austin and saying, "Oh, it's not this anymore." I'm like, have you looked in the Austin Chronicle on a Tuesday night and seen the 70 bands that are playing or whatever?
That's
It's
a
like
really good point.
it's like this, and the stuff that's, we lost this restaurant, we lost that. We're always losing things. That's called progress. So it's like if they tore down my funky old storefront I used to shoot in front of, now there's a cool, you know 7-foot cement wall or a new mural or a new this or so. I'm a visual and artsy person, so it's all going to work for me
Yeah.
somehow. And
Yeah.
it's
And
like this,
forward motion, you
there's
have that forward motion too,
yeah,
with
and
a
like I
real
said,
respect for the back, for the past.
I can be, ask anybody that knows me well. I'm a total curmudgeon on so many things.
I think
And
that's also why I love you so much
but
because I
that's enough,
love grumpy people.
that goes back to our beginning of Johnny Gowdy.
Mhm.
It's like, yes, I can be a dick. I know I can. But it's like if I was just nice all the time, how boring would I be? I
Yeah.
remember meeting Johnny and he had hair down to here. He was
Mhm.
working at Whole Foods with a friend of mine. I'd met him, I think, at a party, but I really realized this guy's interesting. And he had drawn me, my friend Naomi was working with him. And I remember at Whole Foods, I'd go hang out with them. It's back in the day. It was one on Brody when they had one on Brody. And he drew me on one of his fingers and he drew Naomi on the other. And he started doing this weird little Johnny puppet show. And every time I talked to him, he was the sweetest, nicest guy. And
Mhm.
I invited him over to my house one day and he came over and I remember him calling somebody and they weren't there and he needed something from them. And when he hung up, this is old school phones too, this is before
Yeah.
cell phones. He's using my phone to call them and he slams it down. And I don't remember what the context was, but I just remember him cussing and being like, whatever. And literally, even though I liked him and invited him over and thought he was cool, that's the moment I fell in love with him. And we've been friends, we
Yeah.
talk like 2-3 times a week. And we've got,
Mhm.
as he and I pulled a phrase from Richard Lewis and Larry David, they can make fun of each other on Curb Your Enthusiasm because
Mhm.
they have so much in the bank. That's how
Yes.
Johnny and I are. Like
Yeah.
we we just have, again, that's a person I have so much love for. But if I didn't see him being a jerk early
Mhm.
on, who knows if I would have fallen in love with him. And
I
I think
know.
I'm a Libra, and so to me, and so's he. I think that's part of like my Libra mentality is be full of love and goodness and light, but you can be a dick too if you need to. You gotta have that,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And so that's kind of my thing. It's like I've learned that there's people that are good mixtures and people that I thought were good and turn out to be really crummy people.
Mhm.
And it's to me, it's not sad. People going, are you sad? So and so it's not in your life anymore, or this happened or that happened. I'm going, not really, because it's like, you know, if you have something really great that you're holding on to and or if you're holding on to something that's not that great, you don't want to hold on to it. You want to hold on to something that's great.
Make room for the next
So,
thing that's coming
yeah, so
along
I
that's
don't
good for
care
you.
about, I don't really care when things start to go sour. I used to have a lot more of a like, what did I do? What did I do wrong? And what's wrong with me? Or what did we, how can I fix this or whatever? And at this point in my life, it's like, keep on moving, brother.
Time and age is so wonderful in that way,
It
you know?
is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, I think of you and I look at you and I think you're one of the richest men I know. It just kind of keeps coming back to that for me of all the, and I know I don't know you as well as so many people do, but I look forward to getting to know you more and spending
I
more
hope
time
we
with you. And
I hope we do too.
yeah, yeah, I would like that. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh
Thank
man.
you for just being you.
I
And
didn't know
I
what I'd blab about, so it's exciting to know that I
it's
laughed my ass off.
yeah, no, you're great. You're fantastic. I wouldn't have it any other way. It was perfect. Well, I'll have you on again when that book comes out. So there's your little incentive. I know you don't like being told what to do, but I will tell you when the book comes out, you're coming back on.
Oh
So
hell yeah. I'll be making the tour by then. I'll be everywhere.
I'll call your people by that point.
Yeah, well, sadly it'll probably still just be
All
uh,
right. Well, Todd
thank you,
Wolfson,
Kat. Thank you, thank you.
it's a
You're sweet.
pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. All right. Thank you for watching. Until next time, we will see you. Bye.